The opportunity is chicken.
The opportunity is sunflowers.
The opportunity is honey.
The opportunity is community.
The opportunity is youth.
The opportunity is distribution.
The opportunity is Africa Eats.
Africa Eats, a for-profit solution for tackling hunger and poverty across Africa. Now, we all know the problems of hunger and poverty in Africa, and the solutions are not going to come from governments and NGOs. They're going to come from the private sector. Africa Eats is one of those solutions. We are an investment holding company, a little different than you've seen before. We're 30 companies building the food and ag supply chain across the continent.
Hey, Luni, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here again on the show, right?
Thanks for having me back.
Yes.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. So since this is a new podcast format, having a video conversation, so let's do that all over again. So you are wearing so many hats, right?
Just 4 at the moment.
But you're writing a book and then give a lecture to the entrepreneur, coaching them, and then running a Fledge, and then Africa Eats, covering so many continents. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey to Fledge and Africa Eats?
Yeah, I wear, yes, the hats have different colors, but I really only do one thing. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 30 years. I start things. First 20 years I did in tech. I started software companies. Last 4 were backed by venture capitalists, always somebody in California. And then 10 years ago, I made a big switch. I now work with mission-driven for-profit companies, and I do that around the world. The main hat for that is called Fledge. It's a global network of impact accelerators. We spun out Africa Eats from that last year. We'll talk about that later. I also run a nonprofit that turns philanthropy into impact investing because it's needed. And I teach angel investors because we need more angel investors. So I'm doing that as well.
Got it. Yeah, but you live in US now, right?
I live in the US. Yeah, I'm American.
How did you come up with the idea to go all the way to the Africa and then launching a business model in Africa Eats? Why Africa?
You know, I have a mentor. I have a lot of mentors, but I have a great friend, ex-venture capitalist. His advice to me was when you have a choice to make in life, choose the path that looks like you had a plan, because it makes you look smarter. I always think of that advice, but sometimes things happen in happenstance. When I started Fledge, I expected to help mission-driven entrepreneurs from at least Seattle. And what I truly expected was that interesting things would happen along the way, that I would keep my eyes open and along the way, something would happen that was not expected. A lot of things happened that weren't expected. One is that in the first cohort, we had only companies from Seattle, but 2 of them were doing business in Africa. And I had never been to Africa and I knew nothing about it, but it happened. And so we helped them. And then about a year and a half later, we started getting applications from everywhere, dozens and dozens of countries. And we got 3 applications that session, and only 3, from the country of Tanzania, or actually 3 companies doing business in Tanzania. 1 from an American team, 1 from a Canadian team, and 1 from a native Tanzanian. And we thought, okay, that looks interesting. What would happen and they all looked good, but what would happen? What might happen if we bring them all together into one room in Seattle? Because they don't know each other. Might there be some synergies from that? And there weren't, but we started to learn something about Africa. And that was the last session where, at least in Seattle, where the majority of companies weren't from Africa. Because it builds on itself. Once you help some people in Tanzania, they tell their friends, and so they apply, and they have friends in Kenya, and so they apply. And so last year, when we last ran the Fledge Seattle program, we took off for the pandemic. We had 845 applications from 85 countries.
Wow!
Like half of them were from the U.S., Nigeria, and Kenya. Literally, So we're well known in Africa. It just happened.
Yeah. Also, the last time we had this conversation about the African business model. That looks quite interesting, right? So a little different to the venture capital. Can you tell us a little bit about the unique business model and then structure you are trying to use to grow the business in Africa together with your partner in Africa?
Yeah, so here's what happened. So here we are. It's 6, 7, almost 8 years since that Tanzanian cohort, the half Tanzanian cohort. And over the years, we, again, just kept getting great applications and great entrepreneurs from Africa. It's not the only place we did business. We have investees on 4 continents. But we had in last year 27 graduates, all native African, all running companies, all but one running companies in the food and ag sector. And so we said, how can we help them? Again, synergies. Is there something we could do to help all of them at once instead of one at a time? And the answer came up, why don't we try a different model? Why don't we take a mashup of an investment holding company, so Berkshire Hathaway, mash that up. What would Berkshire Hathaway look like if Warren Buffett was a venture capitalist instead of a public equities trader? And then all these companies came through an accelerator. So the other question came up was, okay, what would a growth stage accelerator look like? What would it look like? Because accelerators are generally for earlier stage. And so we mashed those 3 ideas together and we wound up with an investment holding company that, like Berkshire Hathaway, never intends to sell any investment it ever makes. It likes its companies and wants to keep it that way. And because of that, we just think about what services we can provide those companies. And because we're in Africa, and this is an African company, it's incorporated in Africa, because of that, we just keep finding holes. We just keep finding things that, Koreans and Japanese and Chinese would just take for granted, let alone Americans. It's like, okay, you go to get a truck. Like, you have a business, you need a truck. You go to the dealer, you pick out your truck, and at the end of the transaction, they say, well, do you want to buy it with cash? Do you want a loan, or do you want a lease? That's just the way it works, right? Yeah, in Africa, they say, here's how much it costs, and you pay us right now. And they don't have loans and leases. And I didn't know this. I didn't know this until I dove in and started talking about the growth of the companies and how many trucks they need, and why aren't they just going to the bank and getting a truck loan? And the answer is, banks don't do that. I said, okay, well, why isn't the dealer just giving you a lease? And they just look at me like, what's a lease? Like, they don't know. But these are native African entrepreneurs. They don't know.
A banker in Africa, they don't know. They don't really understand the leasing.
Well, they don't understand why the banks aren't lending money, because they thought that's what the banks do, but the banks don't do that. But they don't even know to ask some questions. And so what's interesting is we talk to them all the time, and they tell us what they need. And we come back saying, oh, okay, well, if you were in the States, this is what you do. Can you do that? And the answer is no, not here, not in Tanzania or Uganda or Ghana or Nigeria or Botswana. The answer is just no, it's just not done here.
Yeah.
So we figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I interviewed a couple of the second-hand car trading platform. But I learned that only 1% of second-hand car, purchase is financed by the financial institution in Africa. 99% they use their money out of their pocket.
Yeah, you probably don't know. In many countries in Africa, you can't buy a new car. There are no new car dealers. All the cars are imported, used. Yes. Usually, in the right-hand drive countries, they're usually just used Japanese cars.
Right. Then it sounds like it's a financial institution really doesn't really support that transaction.
Well, once you're in the used car space, then the rules for new cars kind of don't apply anymore.
Right. And I know that you invest through the Africa 8 to 27 company, right? Before?
Yeah, 27 at the moment, soon to be more.
Yes. So how many company are you looking for? To get them on board now.
We're not actually looking for any new ones. What's been happening is that our existing entrepreneurs keep starting more companies.
Oh, that's very interesting.
they're all apparently parallel entrepreneurs. Just some of them don't know it yet. But 2 of our entrepreneurs have 3 companies, and a year ago, one of them had 1, and he just saw needs in the market, so he started some new companies, and they're in the right space. They're in the food and ag space, and so they tell us about them, and we're like, okay, well, we like you, so how much do you need for that company?
Right.
And this kind of started at the beginning. We had 27 entrepreneurs, 27 companies, but some people had 2. We had some co-founders to round it out. But in some cases, we invited both companies from the entrepreneur, but only one of those companies had come to a Fledge Accelerator. So we kind of knew the other company, but we liked the entrepreneur. We just said, okay, both of your companies are in.
Yeah. I interviewed a couple of your portfolio company on my platform, right? I don't know which one belong to your portfolio company. I remember one guy in Tanzania is a milk business, right?
Yeah, Regathe Dairy. Yeah, ninefold increase in revenues in a year.
Right. Actually, I was impressed. I can feel that he has a strong greed and then very focused. And then he said that he trained in Singapore, right? Education. So he already trying to change the work attitude of his local colleague employee. So very impressed.
You find them. If you look hard, if you look a little bit, I don't say if you look hard. If you look a little bit, you just find these amazing entrepreneurs.
Right. That's good. It was really good. Yeah. Okay, so what do you have on top of your mind and for Africa Eat, and what is your end game?
Top of mind at the moment is a new WeFunder crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, I saw that. So
which is open to anyone in the world. You don't have to be American. It's an American crowdfunding platform. Anyone can invest, $100 minimum.
Oh, really? The investor from the outside of America, they can invest in the WeFund platform?
Yeah, as long as you can wire the money or send it to them in some form, they're happy to take your money.
Yeah.
And we're happy to take the money from them. And so it literally went live today. We have a stated goal of $500,000 in this campaign. This is the campaign for the masses. In general, we're out raising $10 million because we need a lot more than $500,000. But for the masses, we're just trying to raise $500,000, and we're at like 327,000 in day one. So that was a good day one. And who knows? A day or a week or a month, it'll be past $500,000. Don't know.
Yeah, I saw that how it progressed. You already achieved the half of the target, right?
More than 2/3 of the way there to the end.
Yes. But how does that work?
Yeah, just to be clear, the $500,000 is the target. It's not a Kickstarter though. It's not like when you get to $500,000, you're done. You put out a goal. If you hit the goal, you can make the goal bigger.
Okay, I
so
see.
Already behind the scenes, what you can't see is as soon as it hits $500,000, the goal changes to 750. Yeah. When you hit 750, the goal changes to $1 million, and it just keeps going.
So investment is made from your vehicle, or the investment go into the direct portfolio company?
It comes into our holding company.
I see.
And we will use it to provide those services I talked about, all the missing services.
Got it. Yeah. As you know, I'm writing the interview article, repurposing interview article in the Korean mainstream newspaper and then the Chinese tech media. So do you have any plan to expand into Asia and work with the Asian partner, investor, any plan?
We think not through Africa Eats, but we're doing this business because we're trying to prove out this mashup model. And so you asked before, I missed the answer. We expect this to be a public company soon, right? The plan says 18 to 24 months, but that's a long way out. I can't promise that's going to happen, but the goal is to be a public company as soon as possible. And since we're in Africa, an African public, listed in an African exchange. And then when it's big enough, we want to list it in London because that's where African companies go. And so the long-term view for our investors is you will own shares in a public company, again, Berkshire Hathaway. And you can leave whenever you want, but like Warren Buffett says, why would you do that? Because we're going to make you more money than anyone else. So this could be your 1,000-fold increase in value in the next few decades if you hang in there. But if you need to leave. Someone else will buy your shares. So we're hoping to prove that model out within this decade. And when we do that, we expect lots of copycats all over the world.
Yes.
So I'm fully expecting a whole bunch of companies in Singapore or Hong Kong or somewhere else that are investing in these mission-driven types of companies in Asia, in Southeast Asia, and I expect some in India, and I expect some in Latin America and elsewhere.
Yes, yeah. Southeast Asia these days, especially startup scene, is very hot. A lot of investment and growing very fast. In terms of valuation, is growing huge these days.
Yeah, well, there's giant opportunities because there are infrastructure pieces, business infrastructure that's missing. And when you find a hole in a market and you have an entire region to fill, like, again, I do Africa. We have, it is, most people don't realize this. There's a 1.1 billion people living in sub-Saharan Africa today.
Right.
There's going to be 2 billion living in sub-Saharan Africa by 2040. The demographics say there's nothing, nothing short of a worse pandemic is going to slow down the growth to 2 billion people living in sub-Saharan Africa, right? 2 point something on the continent, making it soon to be the same scale as India and China combined in terms of people. And so when you find something that's missing there, what's going to happen is the combination of the growth of India and the growth of China, right? All happening across 54 countries, but happening in one region. So the opportunities are mind-blowingly humongous. Like the numbers I could toss out wouldn't make any sense. You'll just call me crazy, but they're huge, huge opportunities over and over and over again in 54 places, 54 countries.
Yeah, agreed. In terms of the consumer population and the economic size, and
plus 10% of the population at most is middle class at the moment.
Yep.
So maybe there's 120 million middle class in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, when I look elsewhere and I see, okay, China's, I don't know the official number anymore, 500 million, maybe it's 600 million now. India's number that I've seen repeated is 450 million or no longer in the bottom poor part of the demographics. So even if Africa doesn't do as well and it's only 300 million or 400 million, that's like the population of the United States, all of a sudden growing into the middle class, wanting everything the middle class wants everywhere else in the world. That demand will just create an enormous amount of change happening there. And then by the time we get to the 2040s, 2050s, we'll literally be talking about 1 billion middle class living in Africa with no poverty.
Yeah.
Like hopefully by 2050,
Agreed.
we will have ended abject poverty.
I personally have observed the development of growth in China. 30 years ago, nobody expected this much growth of China.
Not there at all, and then not that fast, right? Even Taiwan, Korea, Hong Kong in the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
And we forget about that, but the tigers. So we're going to see.
That's a little bit longer past.
It's a generation ago.
Korea is everybody talk about it. Korea used to be one of the poorest country in the world. $60 US dollar GDP per capita in 1960. So people cannot imagine how to link between the two different times.
I was joking about this. So I was in Malawi in the beginning of 2019. Malawi, for those of you who don't even, it's in the southern east part of Africa. At the time I was there, it was the second poorest country in the world. It's now bumped its way up to like fourth, but not because it's grown that much, mostly because there's some nasty places. South Sudan is Somalia are losing value. So here's a country where the per capita GDP, the average income for the entire country is $1 a day. Average, median, right? So it means half the people don't earn $1 a day. All right. So we're sitting there in the capital of Lilongwe, which is one of these fake cities that they just picked on a map, like Brasilia, the capital Brazil. And we're sitting in traffic. And I'm just flabbergasted that why it's a city of 1 million people, although when they designed it, it was like 25,000 or 30,000. So the streets aren't big enough for all the cars. All the cars are basically Toyotas, used Toyotas. And I turned to my guy, my entrepreneur who's driving the car, and I say, like, why are people sitting in traffic? Like, how long does it take you to get home? And he's like, it takes me an hour. I said, well, what does it take you in the middle of the night? He said, like half an hour. So you're wasting an hour a day sitting in traffic. Why don't you just buy a scooter? Like, why don't these people just buy scooters? Like, I was in Taiwan in the 90s. My ex-wife was Taiwanese. I was in Taiwan in the mid 90s, and the road was just covered in scooters. And that's Taiwan
is famous for that. Scooter.
Yeah, and Indonesia is, in China in the growth in the late 80s, early 90s, moved from bikes to scooters. But then by the time I stopped going to Taiwan in the early or late noughts, it was mostly cars and just a few scooters. Like, it was like 80-20 cars and scooters, and the traffic was awful. But I'm sitting there and we're joking for the time I'm in Malawi. I'm like, man, if I had $100 million, which I don't, if I had $100 million to invest, like, I would just import a Chinese scooter factory. Like, I would just buy all the equipment and just start making scooters here. Because, as soon as people realized that they could get home in half the time and they don't really use any fuel compared to a car, and it's warm out all the time. It's a tropical country. Like, I think scooters would just sell like hotcakes, like just sell instantly. And then I would do the same thing in Nairobi, where the traffic's even worse, and in Kampala and Kigali and all the cities that are growing up in Africa. Oh, and sorry, Lagos and Accra on the other side of the continent. Like, somebody's going to make $100 billion of profits making scooters on the continent. But it's not going to be me, because I don't have enough money to do that business.
Got it. So I have already finished all the boring business questions. So let me ask an interesting question. Who is the nicest person you have ever met, and why? Except for your family member.
So I was invited on a trip. I volunteered to be the website creator for this nonprofit in Seattle. And then 6 months later, they asked me if I wanted to go on a trip with the lieutenant governor of the state of Washington, the senior senator from the state of Washington, and a bunch of other dignitaries. And so I said yes. And our destination was India. And we spent an hour with the Dalai Lama. So I don't think you can find a nicer person on the planet than him.
You met Dalai Lama?
I met him. I shook his hand twice. I spent an hour in his presence, mostly with him teaching us. He looked me in the eye for a very long time. He likes to teach looking at someone in the audience, and he just takes turns. And then the most fun part of the trip was that I asked if I could bring one of my children with me. I got permission to do that. So I brought my 16-year-old son, who's now 19. And he had seen the Dalai Lama in person in a big giant stadium when he was in kindergarten, so 11 years earlier. So, and he barely remembered it, but he got to go on this trip. And not only did he get to meet the Dalai Lama, but the Dalai Lama slapped him across the face.
Yeah,
in a very playful manner, laughing and so forth. But I know one of the few people in the world who's been hit by the Dalai Lama.
Right. So I can imagine that's a great, life experience for you and yours.
That was totally and utterly amazing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much taking time to introduce your very interesting, ambitious project Africa 8 and Fledge and your life journey.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.